Please be seated. The court is now in session. Today, the chamber continues to hear the testimony of Prakhon. And if we have time, then we'll hear testimony of another witness. Ms. Sakawati, please report the attendance of the parties and other individuals to today's proceedings. Greffier. Mr. President, for today's proceedings, all parties to this case are present. Mr. Nunchi is present in the holding cell downstairs. He has waived his rights to be present in the courtroom. The waiver has been delivered to the greffier. The witness who is to conclude his testimony today, that is Mr. Prakhon, as well as his duty counsel, Mr. Momratir, are present in the courtroom, and we have no reserved witness today. President, thank you, Ms. Sakawati. The Chamber now decides on the request by Nunchi. The Chamber has received a waiver from Nunchi dated 28 April 2016, which states that due to his health, that is headache, back pain, he cannot sit or concentrate for long, and in order to effectively participate in future hearings, he requires to waive his presence in the 28 April 2016 hearing. Having seen the medical report of Nunchi by the duty doctor for the accused at the ECCC, dated 28 April 2016, which states that today Nunchi has back pain when he sits for long and feels dizzy, and recommends that the chamber shall grant him his request so that he can follow the proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81.5 of the ECCC internal rules, the chamber grants Nunchi his request to follow today's proceeding remotely from a holding cell downstairs via an audio-visual means. The chamber instructs the AV unit personnel to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Nunchi can follow. That applies to the whole day. And I now hand the floor to the co-prosecutors to put further questions to this witness. You may proceed.
Merci, bonjour, monsieur.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors. Good morning to all the parties. I will put some questions to the witness for about 15 minutes. Good morning, witness. Yesterday, when we adjourned, we were talking about Vietnamese prisoners. Prisoners who stayed at S21 in 1977-1978. And you stated that a note was prepared and those notes had to be read. I don't know whether they had to be read by Vietnamese prisoners. Can you clarify this issue and tell us what was the purpose of interrogating Vietnamese? Why were they being interrogated, and what did you expect to get from them through those interrogations?
As for the Vietnamese prisoners, they were instructed to repeat what has been arranged by Mom Nai Alice Chan. Chan actually prepared a statement for the prisoners to read, and that is the confession that they entered the Cambodian territory in order to spy on us. So the broadcaster can be made so that the Vietnamese side could hear what happened and could hear that we arrested those people and actually they confessed. And that is the purpose of Chan and Duch. They wanted the Vietnamese side to hear the confession.
Et dans ces aveux,
And in those confessions which were prepared by Cham and Deutsch, were the names and duties of the Vietnamese prisoners correct?
The names are the correct names of the prisoners who confessed. Some of them were soldiers and some were civilians.
est-ce que vous avez entendu vous-même
Did you yourself hear the broadcast of those confessions in quotes? Those confessions obtained from those Vietnamese prisoners at S21, did you yourself hear the broadcast of those confessions on the radio?
Usually every morning at 7 o'clock the confessions were broadcast on the radio. The speech was made originally in Vietnamese and interpreted into Khmer.
et comment Chan et Duch faisaient-ils pour que
And how did Chan and Deutsch proceed to make sure the Vietnamese accepted to read those confessions? Did they use tricks or violence or persuasion?
I saw him making a gentle appeal to the prisoners, or sometimes he cheated them so that they would read the prepared confessions.
je crois avoir entendu hier
I believe I heard you say yesterday that they promised to liberate them if they confessed. Did I properly understand your testimony yesterday, or that's something you did not say?
Yes, that is correct.
est-ce que vous savez, puisque vous avez mentionné qu'il y avait
Since you stated that at times there were civilians and soldiers among the Vietnamese, do you know whether there were any Vietnamese amongst them who had fled their countries or their country and had found themselves as refugees on the boats off the shores of Cambodia, on the coastal waters of Cambodia and the territorial waters of Cambodia? That is, the boats were in the territorial waters of Cambodia.
I never saw refugees, however I saw fishermen who were caught.
Vous avez parlé plusieurs fois d'un incident
You spoke several times of a specific incident before the OCIJ investigators. You made mention of a Vietnamese baby who had been thrown from the roof of a building. Can you describe this incident and tell us what exactly you saw and where exactly that happened?
I'd like to backtrack a little bit before that incident. That is when I was guarding outside a compound near the fire station. There was a kitchen hall there, and there was a big tamarind tree at the corner. that is to the south direction of the fire truck station. There was a two-story house, and it was used as an office to receive the prisoners. I was standing guard on the ground floor, and then there was a family, a Vietnamese family who arrived, that is the husband, the wife, and a young child. The child followed the parents, and Dai Bu and Toi dragged the child away from the parents. And took the child out of the office, that is to the veranda on the first floor, and dropped the child onto the ground. The child subsequently died, and then he signaled me to take the dead child and buried it.
Bien, j'ai des questions alors un peu plus.
I have some more general questions now regarding the policy of the regime vis-à-vis the Vietnamese. During meetings you attended with Deutsch, including the meeting at which Son Sen taught you policy, did they talk about the policy of democratic Cambodia vis-à-vis the Vietnamese? And particularly, did Deutsch and Son Sen tell you that the Vietnamese had to be considered as the enemy?
President witness, please hold on, and Councillor Copper, you have the floor.
I object, Mr. President, to the phrasing of this question. Good morning, by the way. It should be clear exactly what the prosecution is referring to. Is he talking about Vietnam as a country? Is he talking about Vietnam's policy? Is he talking about Vietnamese people in Vietnam? Is he talking about Vietnamese people living in democratic Cambodia? What exactly does he mean when he refers to the Vietnamese in his question?
Je vais préciser d'abord la.
Let me specify the period. I'm talking of the period from 1977 to 1978. That is the period during which you said Vietnamese prisoners arrived in large numbers at S21. During that period, did Deutsch and Son Sen tell you that all Vietnamese, regardless of who they were, had to be considered as the enemy of democratic Cambodia?
During 1977 and 78, there were no Vietnamese people living inside Cambodia. Those who had lived in Cambodia before either had left to Vietnam, or they had all been killed since 1975. That is one case. And now I refer to the war between Cambodia and Vietnam between 77 and 78. We staff at S21 were told that Vietnamese were the hereditary enemy of the Communist Party of Cambodia. And we intended to retake the part of the Ko Sang Sin, that is Cambodia crown. And these instructions were relayed by Son Sen and Dutch to us at S21 during a political study session.
Je voudrais rebondir sur ce que
I'll take my cue from what you have just stated by saying that there were no longer any Vietnamese living in Cambodia after 1975 and 1976, because either they had gone back to Vietnam or they had been killed, from what you have just stated. I would like to read out to you two extracts of the notebook of an interrogator at S21E3/833, and I would like you to react to that. The first extract is on page 69 in French, and the ERN is 00282536. There is no English translation of this document. In Khmer, it is 000777729. And this is what the first extract is. In 1970, Vietnamese nationals in Cambodia numbered 500,000. And then we had Vietnamese soldiers from 3 divisions, and then we had the cadres from Hanoi, who numbered more than 1,000. And then it reads again, in 1976, there were no longer any Vietnamese on Cambodian soil. End of quote, free translation. There's another passage which gives us another version, a different version. It's on page 80 in French, 00282547, and in Khmer, 000777740. And I quote, free translation, the situation of Vietnamese. The Vietnamese are our deepest adversaries. Their objective is to guzzle up our territory and make it theirs. They still subsist. There are still Vietnamese forces subsisting in democratic Cambodia. We still have the Vietnamese nationals who are among those who had to be sent back to their country in 1973 because the traitors had concealed them. End of quote. Free translation. So we find that in this passage we are talking of the situation in 1973, and you said that they had left in 1975. Did you ever hear Deutsch or Son Sen tell you that, as a matter of fact, there were still some Vietnamese left in Cambodia in 1977 and 1978 because the traitors had concealed them in the country?
I did not hear that statement during the time.
Bien, j'ai deux dernières questions.
I have, I believe, 2 last questions. They have to do with the time when you left S21 in early January 1979, as the Vietnamese forces were advancing. Yesterday, you would recall that we covered together the last confession you talked about. That was the 4th of January 1979. Can you tell us when you stopped working as an interrogator and what happened in the few days following the arrival of the Vietnamese and your flight?
In late 1978 or early 1979, the situation at the time was that the Democratic Cambodia forces actually were fighting and advancing inside the territory of Vietnam. We could even hear a gunfight at S21. And that happened probably during the last month of 1978. And at that time, we stopped interrogating any more prisoners, and I saw prisoners being transported out continuously until the 2nd or the 3rd of January, when prisoners were no longer transported out. And as I said, during this time, there were no incoming prisoners, there were only outgoing prisoners. And on 7 January 1979, we at S-21 were equipped with guns. Everyone was armed in order to defend ourselves against the Vietnamese troops. And we saw only 3 Vietnamese armored vehicles from the Yun side who were crossing the Monivong bridge. And later on they advanced toward Po Chin Tong airport. And the forces of Pol Pot in Phnom Penh actually retreated themselves everywhere. And the situation was rather chaotic at the time. And they were withdrawing or retreating along the Suez Canal. And nobody was actually in charge as the situation was so confusing.
Tout à l'heure, vous avez dit
A while ago, you said that the prisoners were transported in large numbers towards the exterior. What became of those prisoners? What did they do to those prisoners?
I saw prisoners being transported out, and it's likely that they were taken out to be executed. Although I myself did not witness any execution at the time, since I did not go with them. They were transported out in a fully covered 4x4 tracks, and there were 3 or 4 tracks at a time. Prisoners were ordered to board the tracks, and some of them were actually thrown onto the tracks. And there were about 30 or 40 of them in those fully covered tracks. And they were transported out, and in my conclusion, they were transported to Chiang Ai area.
le jour où vous avez fui,
On the day you fled, did the staff members of S-21 also take along with them a number of prisoners who are working at S-21, whether in mechanics, painting, or farming, crops, or what became of them?
On 7 January 1979, at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, prisoners who were allowed to work within the compound of S-21, namely Chan, Mai, Vanat, and other prisoners whose names I could not recall, went together. They were fleeing to Om Leang, Tropang, Achrei in Kampong Speu province.
est-ce que vous avez jamais appris de la bouche de d'autres
Did you ever hear Deutsch say whether on the 7th of January or later, why no orders were issued that those prisoners who were working at S-21 be executed? Did he ever talk about the fact that they were not executed? And did he ever say why they were not executed?
I did not hear any instruction at the time. As I said, the situation was chaotic. We were all panicked, and people were everywhere fleeing. And there was then, in my opinion, no plan to execute the remaining prisoners, as Dutch and other people were fleeing for their life at the time as well. We were fleeing through the rice fields and through other area, and by about 4 o'clock next morning, we saw ammo vehicle equipped with M16 were trying to intercept us, and we just kept fleeing toward Om Liang Tropiang Chray in Kampong Speu. And prisoners were in the same condition as us, they were fleeing as well.
Correction by the interpreter. We meant to say workshops of sweepers and cleaners earlier. Thank you, witness. I have no further questions for you.
President, the floor is now given to the lead co-lawyers for civil parties to put question to the witness. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors. I'd like the President to give the floor to Madame Chiet Van Le to put questions to the witness. President, yes, she may proceed, and you have up to 10 o'clock this morning. Chiet Van Le, thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors, and good morning, everyone in and around the courtroom. My name is Chiet Van Le. I'm a lawyer for civil parties, and good morning, Mr. Witness. Yesterday, you testified before the chamber on the issue of blood drawing, and I'd like to get clarifications from you on this matter. Can you tell the chamber which year the blood drawing took place? Answer. I am not sure as which year the blood drawing took place. It could happen around 1977 or 78. Thank you. Question. And did you know who actually authorized the blood drawing? Answer. I only saw the act, but I did not know who actually authorized blood drawing. I saw the medic tree was conducting the blood drawing in a room located near the main entrance to Tulsley. So when I returned to the compound at around 11 p.m. That night, I saw him drawing blood from prisoners. Question. You were there at the time. What happened to prisoners after their blood had been drawn, and what was the status of those prisoners? Answer. After the blood had been drawn, they removed the tube, and prisoners were thrown to a corner of the room, and they were piled up there. Then they were placed on a cart, and they were taken away on that cart to be buried. Though I did not see that act myself, only next morning, when I went to work outside in the field at around 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, to the field, I saw fresh dirt being used to cover the pits. Question. Prisoners whose blood was drawn, did the prisoners actually die immediately after the blood had been drawn? Answer. prisoners did not yet die after the blood had been drawn, although they were in a very weak state. They could not move. They were motionless, and I could see they were still breathing. Question: since you were there, did you see how many sacks of blood had to be drawn from each prisoner? Answer: so to the number of sacks of blood, I could not tell you about that. However, each prisoner had their blood fully drawn from their body. Question: and for you personally, how did you feel when you witnessed such an incident? Were you scared? Answer: I was shocked upon seeing the blood being drawn from the prisoners, but I did not show it to anyone. During the regime, I knew what was right and what was wrong, and I did not dare to say anything to anyone or to speak about it, because during the regime, if anyone who opposed would be dead. Question: yesterday you also testified that it was a medic 3 who drew blood from prisoners. And on the 7th January 1979, when Vietnamese troops arrived, what happened to the medic 3? What was his fate? Answer: the medic 3 was actually in charge of the medical unit. And at the time, there were 3 or 4 more medical staff there besides 3. And to my knowledge, later on, the medic 3 had been arrested, detained, and executed.
Lawyer, thank you, Mr. Witness. I am now asking you about the rape at S21. As an interrogator at S21, did you happen to see that there was a rape in the compound of S21? Answer: you are asking me about the rape or about the violation of rights of prisoners? Lawyer, I am asking you about the rape on women. Answer: I witnessed and I knew that there was a rape. I could see that the woman was sent back after she was raped. It happened at the back of the house where I was interrogated a prisoner. It was around 1 or 2 p.m. to which the messenger or the security guard of Mom Chan took Mom Nai alias Chan took that woman to interrogate in a room on the ground floor, and that woman was raped. And later on, that rape was learned by a messenger of Mom Nai alias Chan, and Tuj was arrested and detained on the first floor of Chan's building. That Tuj was handcuffed and his legs were not shackled, so he fled to the second floor of that building, and he jumped off the building touching the electrical wire, and he survives thanks to the bananas trees at the time. And then Tuj was arrested once again. Question. Besides the rape committed by Tuj, did you see any other rapes committed by any other individuals else beside him? Answer. I have never heard any incident of rape beside the one committed by Tuj. Question. Did you know Lai Chmien, who was a former interrogator as well at S21? Answer. Yes, I knew Lai Chmien. He was working with me. After members from 703 had been all arrested, Lai Chmien was sent to work with me from the west by Duch. He was at the time around 13 or 14 years old. Lawyer. Thank you, Mr. Witness. In June 2016, Lai Chmien testified before the chamber between 1103 to 1600. Lai Chmien said that there were 3 incidents of rape. Tuj committed rape against a prisoner, and the second incident was committed by Tang, the medic, and Seung, the medic, and also the messenger of Taho raped a prisoner as well. Did you know about the 2 other incidents of rape? Answer. I know all those names, but I do not know whether the 2 individuals raped the prisoners, the female prisoner as well. Perhaps the security guards working outside, walking there and back, knew about those incidents. Lawyer. Thank you. Did the superior of S21 reprimand or punished those who committed rapes against the female prisoners? Answer. For instance, Tuj, the one who committed rape against a female prisoner, was arrested and later detained and later on killed. Lawyer. Thank you. You were an interrogator at S21. Did you happen to see prisoners committing suicide at S21? Answer. No, I never witnessed that, but I heard Ho and Doj say in the study session that one of the prisoner grabbed the weapon from the guard and used the kerosene lamp to pour the kerosene on him or herself to burn themselves, and also there were other types of incidents happening at that location. Lawyer. Thank you. I am now moving to another topic in relation to interrogation. All the prisoners at S21 who were sent out for interrogation. So my question is, how long after they were detained at S21 before they were sent for interrogation? Answer. Prisoners at S21 There was no specific period to detain them. Whenever prisoners were needed for interrogation, they would be sent for interrogation right away. Some prisoners were detained for half a month or sometimes 1 month before they were sent for interrogation. Lawyer, thank you. Interrogation room. In relation to interrogation room, how was it organized? Were there tables and chairs inside that room? Answer. Each room had a window and a door, but they were closed completely, and there was a table and a chair, shackle, cuff, pot, the container for relieving, for prisoners relieve themselves. Question. Were they blindfolded? I mean, were prisoners blindfolded when they were interrogated? Answer. During the interrogation, usually they were handcuffed when they were being brought inside the interrogation room, and they were also shackled. They were also blindfolded, and after their arrival in the interrogation room, they were unblindfolded, and instead they were handcuffed. Question. Was there only you in the interrogation room, or were there any others people beside you? Answer. There was only me and the prisoner in the interrogation room. Lawyer, thank you. And before the interrogation, did you inform the prisoner that you interrogated about the offenses they committed? Answer. Before the interrogation, I have never told them the offenses they committed, and the upper echelon never informed me of the offenses or the network they were engaged in. Lawyer, thank you. In principle, did you receive any annotation from Dutch or from any other people at S21 when the prisoners were sent to you for interrogation? Answer. There were no annotations for interrogation. I was informed to ask general question. Lawyer, thank you. How long did it take to interrogate each and every prisoner to obtain his or her confession? Answer. Usually it took several months or a few months to interrogate prisoners. Cheng alias Pan, that I compiled the confession and interrogated him. I spent about 2 months to interrogate him before I could obtain the confession. But for some other cases, there were several days or just a few weeks to obtain the confession. So I, on some occasion, could get the confession for a short period of time. Lawyer, thank you. And what about the time? So when exactly did you interrogate the prisoners? Did you also interrogate the prisoners at night time? Answer. Under the rule or regulation at that compound, I had to interrogate the prisoners from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. and from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. and from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Lawyer, thank you. When you were interrogating prisoners, did you allow prisoners to sit on a chair facing you, or you asked the prisoners to sit directly on the ground? Answer. They were told to sit on the chair facing interrogator, facing me. Question. Did you ever ask the prisoners to sit on the floor? And why? Answer. On some occasions, they were told to sit on the floor because of the torture, and they fell off the chair onto the ground. Lawyer. Thank you. As an interrogator at S21, what types of prisoners did you interrogate? Did you ever interrogate foreign prisoners? Answer. I interrogated only Khmer prisoners. I never interrogated foreign prisoners. Lawyer. Were there foreign prisoners at S21 to your knowledge? Answer. There were Vietnamese, American, and Australian prisoners whom I used to see. Lawyer, thank you. In relation to American and Australian prisoners, who interrogated them? Answer. Duch and Chan interrogated those prisoners in a public venue in the compound of the prison, and that venue would be seen by everyone walking past. No one had the command of English, so only Chan and Duch could interrogate those foreign prisoners. Did you know the names of those foreign prisoners, and did Duch use violence against those prisoners? Answer. In relation to American and Australian prisoners, I could recognize one foreign prisoner. The name was displayed on his shirt, David Scott. And after the interrogation by Duch and Chan, that prisoner said his name was David Scott. That person could be recalled and remembered by me. Question. Did Duch and Chan use violence against these two foreign prisoners? Answer. I saw him kicking and beating. Not beating, but only kicking. Question. What was the fates of those for those American and Australian prisoners after interrogation? Answer. I did not witness and knew about the fates of those prisoners. I learned from Kua, the security guard at S21, that the American and Australian prisoners were burnt at the roads leading from Wat Mahamontrey to Wat Tu Tumpung, and also to the west of the fire department. And that location was a former Christian church. No one lived there at that church. Only the security guards were there, and the two prisoners were asked to were put on the middle of the road, and the used tires were placed on them, and after that they were burned. Lawyer: thank you. I am now moving to another topic about the execution of prisoners. Mr. Witness, as an interrogator at S21, you lived and worked as a security guard and an interrogator at S21 for quite a period of time. I want you to tell the court, did you ever see prisoners killed at S21? Answer: I never witnessed the execution. Question: did somebody tell you, or did you learn from your colleagues about the execution? Answer: I heard people say about execution. They told me. But execution did take place during the wartime when the former Lone Nol soldiers were killed, and I was asked to carry those former Lone Nol soldiers away onto the vehicles. Question: and when the prisoners at S21 died, what did they do to those dead prisoners? Did they carry those dead prisoners onto the vehicles? So what happened to those dead prisoners? Answer: I told the court already, but let me clarify. It happened very frequent. It happened frequently that the prisoners were transported on the Chinese-made trucks which were fully covered. Some prisoners could even walk, so they were pushed up onto the trucks. Some who could walk up onto the trucks were allowed to walk onto those trucks, and those trucks were fully covered. Lawyer: thank you. Where were those prisoners taken to in those fully covered trucks? Answer: I did not know at the time, since I was the guard within the perimeter at S21. I learned about the execution at Chương Ác after I was interviewed by a foreign journalist at Chương Ác. Lawyer: thank you. Mr. Witness, can you tell the chamber if you used to see or you learned about the process of execution Did they shoot the prisoners dead, or how did they kill the prisoners? Answer. Execution happened within S21. It was committed by Jan, the big, who had a big build and dark complexion. And prisoners were bitten by clubs at the back of their necks, and after that they were thrown away into the pits. After the killers coming back from the killing sites, they would tell us at the dining hall while we were eating. Lawyer, thank you. Did you ever hear that a prisoner's abdomens were cut open to remove internal organs, for example, liver or gallbladders? And then those internal organs were dried on the fence. President interrupts. Please ask specifically about what the witness have known and have seen. Please do not ask whether if the prisoner knew or used to hear. Sometimes what you are asking is about the rumor. Sometimes what the witness or what people hear may have been just the rumor, so please ask specifically about what the witness have known and have heard. Lawyer. Thank you, Mr. President. I am now asking the witness about the detention conditions. Mr. Witness, for most of the prisoners who were sent out of S21, did that happen during the daytime or nighttime? Answer. Prisoners who were to be sent out of S21 were transported at night time, but for bringing in prisoners into S21, it happened during both the daytime and the night time. Lawyer, thank you. You told the court yesterday that prisoners who came into S21 were asked to inform their biography, and they were also photographed. So why did that happen? And did this also apply during the time that the prisoners died, after the prisoner died? Answer. After their entry, their biography were collected and they were photographed, and also their height was recorded. But after the prisoners died, they were not photographed, or they did not do any other things about biography on those dead prisoners. Lawyer, thank you. At S21, did you ever see prisoners were released to work outside the compound of S21? Answer. Only a few were released to work as mechanics and painters or artists or carpenters at S21, and also to install the electricity based on their expertise. Only that group of prisoners was released. Lawyer, can you tell the chamber whether or if the security guards were equipped with weapons? Answer. They were fully armed. I mean, the security guards at the outside compound were fully armed. Although they were around 10 years old, but security guards within the compound of S21 were not armed. President interrupts. You run out of time now, Madam Lawyer. And now I'm asking judges on the bench whether or not you have questions to put to the witness, and if so, you may proceed. Judge Vance, do you have any questions to put to the witness? And now Judge Lavange can take the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, I have a few follow-up questions for you. This morning, if I properly understood what you said in answer to a question put to you by the co-prosecutor, you stated that in 1977 and in 1978, there were no longer any Vietnamese in Cambodia, and you added that, and I quote, free translation, either they had left or they had been killed, end of quote. Is that indeed what you stated? Do you confirm these statements?
Yes, that is my statement.
Est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire si vous...
Can you tell the chamber whether you were aware of orders that had to be followed regarding the departure of Vietnamese leaving Cambodia? Were you aware of any orders to that effect?
During the regime, there was no order to allow the Vietnamese to return to their country. Lots of Vietnamese people had been cleansed during the colonial regime. So by the time the Khmer Rouge regime took over the country, there were not many Vietnamese living inside the country.
Est-ce qu'il y a eu des politiques, pour autant que vous le sachiez?
To the best of your recollection, were there policies underpinning the decisions that were taken regarding Vietnamese who remained in Cambodia when the Khmer Rouge came to power?
I did not hear anything about chasing Vietnamese soldiers off the Cambodian territory.
Il y a peut-être un problème de traduction.
There may well be an interpretation problem somewhere. I'm not talking of Vietnamese soldiers. I am talking of persons who were of Vietnamese origin and who were living in Cambodia. To the best of your recollection, were there any such persons living in Cambodia when the Khmer Rouge came to power? And if yes, did you hear any orders or were you aware of any policy regarding those persons?
When the Khmer Rouge took control of the country, I did not hear of any principle to chase Vietnamese civilians back to their country. And as I said, Vietnamese people had been cleansed during the colonial regime. And for that reason, I never heard of any policy to cleanse them during the Khmer Rouge regime.
Est-ce que vous avez entendu une expression?
Did you ever hear the expression that the expression a Cambodian body and a Vietnamese head? If you ever heard it, what did that mean, or what does it mean?
Yes, I heard of the expression Khmer bodies with Vietnamese minds.
Qu'est-ce que ça voulait dire?
What did it mean?
The expression means that they had the ideas or the views of the Vietnamese, although they hate the Khmer bodies.
Est-ce que ces gens étaient considérés comme...
Were those people considered as the enemy?
I couldn't make that judgment.
Est-ce que vous avez entendu parler d'une...
Did you ever hear of any directives or orders concerning leaders of the Communist Party of Cambodia who were trained in Hanoi, that is the CPK?
For these major affairs, they were beyond the range of my knowledge.
Est-ce que au cours des formations que vous avez suivies,
During training sessions you received from Deutsch and Son Sen, did you ever hear anyone talk of the charm?
But
As for the Cham people, I did not hear anything of importance about them. During the regime, there was no distinction between the Cham and the Khmer people.
est-ce que vous avez été amené vous-même à
Did you yourself ever have to interrogate Cham detainees? And were you aware of any detainees at S21 who were Cham?
Yes, there were, but I cannot recall any detail regarding the Cham.
Donc vous ne savez pas pourquoi
So you do not know why those persons were detained at S21, or did you know why they were detained at S21?
I only knew there were a Cham who were detained at S21, but I cannot recall their names.
pour être bien sûr que nous soyons compris.
To be sure that I have properly understood what you have stated, did you yourself ever interrogate a Cham prisoner?
Yes, I did.
Et est-ce que vous vous souvenez
Do you recall why the prisoners had been arrested?
No, I cannot recall that. It happened many years ago.
Et est-ce que par hasard vous vous souvenez des questions
And do you perchance remember the questions you put to that prisoner or the instructions you were given with a view to interrogating those prisoners?
No, I do not recall any.
Ce matin, vous avez
This morning, you also stated that you saw, if I understood correctly, the bodies of former Lon Nol officials who were executed. When did you see those bodies? Was that before the fall of Phnom Penh or after it was captured, or both?
Allow me to clarify regarding what I saw and the removal of the bodies. In fact, on the day of the 17th April 1975, and after the liberation was achieved, soldiers of the former regime were arrested and guarded at the court of first instance in Ta Khmau, and later on they were killed at the Kok Ro Luh pagoda. That's what I witnessed.
Est-ce que vous vous souvenez du nombre de soldats
Do you remember the number of soldiers who assembled there, and do you remember their ranks?
I can recall one individual, that is Kedera, who was a former colonel of the Lon Nol regime, and he had a wife who was a French national, and besides him I cannot recall any other names.
Mais est-ce que vous vous souvenez si
Do you nevertheless recall whether there were many soldiers? Were there only a couple of persons? Were there dozens of persons? Or more than that?
I am not sure about the total number. However, those soldiers were put on through CMZ tracks along with their family members. President, thank you, Judge Slovene. It is now convenient for our short break. We'll take a break now and resume at 10:30. Court officer, please assist the witness during the break time and invite him, as well as his duty counsel, back into the courtroom at 10:30. The court is now in recess.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកចូល